Hey everybody, it's Booray from Tampa, Florida, and today we are going to talk about the X-T30. Specifically, we're going to talk about the Fuji X-T30 and whether or not it is a replacement for the Fuji X100F. The X100V is just around the corner. It's going to come out in just a couple of months, and maybe you're thinking about upgrading to the V, maybe you're thinking about switching. I know I was. So I got my hands on a Fuji X-T30 and I used it for a week, and I'm going to let you know what I think. But first, don't forget to listen to my podcast. It's called Photobomb. It's available anywhere that podcasts can be found. You can join my group on Facebook. It is called Pro Photo Talk with Booray. And you can find links to everything that I carry, as well as all my videos and blog posts, all on my website, boorayperry.com. Just go to boorayperry.com/education. All right, let's get started. So first, let me tell you where my head is at. Those of you who have been watching my channel for some time know that I love my Fuji X100F. If you're new to the channel, then I will tell you that I'm a professional photographer in Tampa. I make my living as a photographer, and I use Canon gear for all my professional work. But I use the Fuji X100F for all my personal work, which means when I'm going to my kids' recitals, when I'm going to Christmas at my parents' house, when I'm going on vacation, when I'm going anywhere and I just want to grab a camera, the Fuji X100F is the camera that I take, and I love this camera, and that's why there are so many videos dedicated to this camera on my channel. However, the Fuji X100V is just around the corner, and I've been thinking, am I going to upgrade? I upgraded from the Fuji X100S to the Fuji X100F, and I thought it was worth it. But this camera is so good, I'm not so sure that the V is going to have enough new features to make it worth the considerable cost. They're saying the V is going to come in at about $1,500. You can buy this camera new right now for $1,100, and I've heard on sale sometimes you can get it as low as $900. So will it be worth $1,500 to buy the V, or would you be better off buying the older F? Will it be worth the upgrade to buy the V? I don't know. But as I started thinking about that, I started looking at the Fuji X-T30. Now, the Fuji X-T30 is an interesting camera because it kind of falls into a realm of, it's not quite a pro camera, but it's not quite a hobby camera. I'm not really sure exactly what it is. I had a chance to use one for a week over Christmas. I shot all my Christmas pictures with this camera. And I got to tell you, I was blown away. Super impressive camera. And I started to think, maybe instead of moving to the next Fuji X100 series camera, what if I got an X-T30? What if I put a small lens on the X-T30? Would it be able to do pretty much everything that the X100F does for me, but also still have the ability to put bigger lenses on it, should I so choose? Well, having one for a week gave me a chance to really put it through its paces and answer some of the questions that I had about this camera. And I came up with an answer, but as is always the case, my answers are a little bit tricky. So first, let's take a look at price, because price is important. The Fuji X100F, brand new right now, is $1,100. The Fuji X-T30, brand new right now, body only, is $800. So it is cheaper than the X100F. It's a couple $100 cheaper, $300 cheaper than the F. And if the price of the V comes in where we think it's going to come in at $15, then it is in fact $700 cheaper than the X100V. However, that's body only. You have to put a lens on the camera, right? So let's say you want to put a lens on the camera that matches the Fuji X100F or the forthcoming V. These cameras have a 23mm fixed lens, and the widest aperture is f2. Now, the closest you are going to get to that with this camera is a 23mm f1.4 lens, and this lens is $800. $800. So that lens with this camera will run you $1,600. That's actually $100 more than if you buy the brand new Fuji X100V when it comes out, if it comes out at $1,500. For the purposes of this video, we're going to assume that that's going to be the price. If it isn't, well, you can do the math in your head. However, do you have to have that lens, right? Because there are less expensive lenses that you can get. Some of them, in some ways, more attractive. For example, they have an 18mm f2 lens that is $600 and smaller. They have a 27mm f2.8 lens that is only $450 and smaller. These lenses are so small that it really makes the X-T30 smaller than the X100F once you put that pancake lens on there. I mean, if the biggest thing that you love this camera for is the fact that it's so portable and easy to carry around, guess what? The X-T30 could be even easier to carry around. However, it won't necessarily be cheaper, because even if you buy the cheapest lens at $450, you're going to spend $1,250 for this camera with a lens versus $1,100 for this camera. Possibly $900 if you catch it on sale, or $1,500 for the new one. So price, not really a factor. And that's a big deal, because when I started looking at the X-T30, the first thing that I was looking at was, oh my gosh, $800 for the body. But then I realized, oh, you know, once you put the lens on there, are you really saving that much money? Okay, so price really isn't a factor. So let's talk about what the two cameras can do when they are configured the same, when they have the same lens. Now, I have to say right off the bat, if they have a 23mm lens, if you put the 23mm on this, it's actually a 1.4 aperture lens. It's a little bit bigger than the Fuji X100F is going to be, but it's 1.4. You're getting an extra stop, and that's big, right? Because crop sensor cameras don't give you the same bokeh as full-frame sensor cameras. I did a video about that. It's right here on my channel. You can go right there and check that out. It's not quite the same bokeh, so the more wide open you can get, the better. You know, it's always nice. So let's say you're putting that lens on the camera. Will the X-T30 be able to do everything that the X100F can do? Will it do enough? Right? Because the real sacrifice that you're going to make with the X-T30 is you're going to probably give up some of the functionality that you get with the X100F, but what you're going to gain is the ability to put interchangeable lenses on there. So, functionality. I was surprised to discover when I went to the beach and I took these cameras out that there's quite a bit of functionality in the X100F that I kind of take for granted. Particularly, it's the leaf shutter and the neutral density filter and the flash sync speed. You see, this camera has a built-in leaf shutter, and I did a video on the leaf shutter. It's right up there too. And what that means is that the camera itself is virtually silent. Virtually silent, which means it doesn't make any noise. Now, the X-T30 makes a great noise. I loved it. You know, like a camera. And to be honest, this camera feels a little weird when I've got all the sound turned off. But I do have all the sound turned off because when I'm using this camera, I really don't like to draw attention to myself. I like to be able to shoot very candid. And I've gotten used to the fact that this camera is completely silent, and people don't really know if I'm just looking at the menu picture system or if I'm just taking pictures. It enables me to get more pictures of people in candid moments and really get some real life, which is what I'm looking for. So, you know, points go to the X100F for that. That nice silent stuff of the leaf shutter. But the other thing about it is, the leaf shutter gives me a flash sync speed of 1/2000th of a second. Holy mackerel. Again, there's a video online about that. Being able to shoot with a flash in bright sunlight at 1/2000th of a second can be a real game changer when you're shooting outside in bright sunlight. And I work in Florida and shoot in Florida, and so I'm in bright sunlight quite a bit. And then finally, the neutral density filter. There's a built-in 3-stop neutral density filter on this camera, and although I didn't think I used it that much, I discovered that when I was at the beach and I was shooting with both cameras, the minute I pulled this camera out of my pocket, I immediately turned that neutral density filter on because it was a bright day, and I knew, oh, I want that neutral density filter so that I can open up that aperture more. And again, there's a video on my channel about the neutral density filter. This is starting to look like a video that just promotes my other videos, and I apologize for that. But I honestly was surprised when I started shooting the two cameras side by side at how much I really did appreciate these special features that are built in to the Fuji X100. I'll tell you the one thing that I didn't find myself super appreciative about, and that's the optical viewfinder. Probably the biggest thing that people talk about with this camera is the optical viewfinder, and I just almost never use it. I think one of the big advantages of using a mirrorless camera is that you can see your exposure in real time. You can see exactly what your exposure is going to be before you pull the trigger, and I want to see that. So I really don't use the optical, and so I didn't miss it at all when I was using the X-T30. So advantage to the Fuji X100F for all of these wonderful little features, these quirky little features that we've come to love about this camera and start to become kind of indispensable once you get used to using them. That's not to say that the X-T30 doesn't bring some great stuff. Well, it's a beautiful camera. I mean, we talk about the X100F being a beautiful camera, but this is a beautiful camera too. And let me just tell you right now, Fuji, this color here, what do they call this? This charcoal? Is that? I think it's charcoal. Yeah. Can you come out with a Fuji X100V with the charcoal? We would like that. Yeah, I think I'm going to go with the black if I get that camera. But if you have the charcoal, I think that's a no-brainer. I'm going to go with the charcoal. So what are you getting with the X-T30 that you don't get with the X100F? Well, I'll tell you what you're getting. You're getting the brand new sensor, the same one that goes into the X-T3. You're getting a tilt screen, which I did appreciate when I was trying to hold the camera low or hold the camera high versus the X100F. You're getting a touch screen so you can touch and focus. You're losing the D-pad, right? The X100F has a D-pad, and they don't put the D-pad on the X-T30 because it's a touch screen. I kind of like the D-pad because you've got your finger right there. You can just quickly boom, 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 left, right, boom, boom, up and down, whatever you want to do. And when using a touch screen, that's more movement. You know, I've got big fingers, so I'm perfectly fine with the D-pad. However, touch focus is very convenient if you're using the rear screen. You can't deny touch focus is great, so touch focus is good. But let me tell you something, ergonomically wise, this camera, when you put a big lens on it, and this is the 24 to 70 millimeter equivalent lens right here. This is the, what's it called? The, I've got it written down right here. 16 to 55, thank you. This is the 16 to 55 millimeter lens. And I purposely wanted to try the camera with this lens because if I was to get this camera instead of the X100F, I would be doing it so I could put interchangeable lenses on the camera. So I wanted to see what that was going to be like, right? And as you can see, this thing's a monster. This is a monster lens. And when you put this on the camera really becomes quite heavy and ungainly. In fact, the lens is so big that it goes below the camera level here. So when you set the camera down, it kind of rocks. It doesn't sit flat because this is lower than this is, right? And you've got to support this camera in your left hand. You've got to hold it by the lens all the time. And there are two dials on the lens you need to use. One of them is the zoom and the other one is the aperture. And when you're holding the camera like this, you can't, right, you've got to grab it with your right hand and take the weight off so you can use these two dials. And when you do that, it's not the most comfortable camera in the world to hold like this when you're supporting that much weight. So I'm not a big fan of a big lens, and this really isn't a big lens. It's a 24 to 70 millimeter equivalent. It's really not considered a big lens, but on this camera, because the body is so small, it's really a huge lens. It's a great lens though. The pictures were fantastic. So one of the benefits that you get with this camera, besides the tilt screen, and you get a full auto switch, by the way, in case you want to just kick it to auto real quick and make sure you don't miss a shot, you can do that. You get the better sensor, you get the touch stuff, you get the interchangeable lenses. And so I decided I was going to put the interchangeable lens to the test. Because I figure really the F100F has got these cool things that I like that you're not going to get with the X-T30. But the question is, will the interchangeable lens trump all? In other words, could I live without the neutral density filter? Could I live without the optical viewfinder? Could I live without the leaf shutter if it meant being able to change lenses? If it meant being able to zoom? So Christmas time, I sat on the floor and I took pictures of my family, opening presents and stuff like that, and I used the zoom lens. I loved it, right? I loved that I could quickly zoom in and get the shot. I mean, I'm a wedding photographer. I'm used to zooming in and getting the shot. And I loved that. But here's what I didn't love. I didn't love that this camera sitting next to me on the floor was this big, clunky, giant thing. That when I wanted to set it down anywhere, I had to be sure I could find a place to set it where it could support, it's big, where it was going to be able to take all the room. I didn't. Whereas with this camera, I can just throw it anywhere, right? And then I realized something else. This camera with its big zoom lens can zoom up to a 70 millimeter equivalent. This camera has a digital zoom that goes to 70 millimeter, 50 and 70. Uh-oh. The digital zoom is pretty good. It really is. Again, there's a video on my channel about the digital zoom on this camera. Now, it's not an optical zoom. It's certainly not an optical zoom. But it's still pretty good. And for the convenience of not having the bigger lens, the ergonomics of holding the bigger lens, the ergonomics of carrying the camera with the bigger lens and setting the camera down, hanging it around my neck, and it's enough. You know, it's enough. That 70 millimeter digital zoom is enough. It outweighs putting an optical zoom on the X-T30. Now, if you were to put a big zoom on this, like a 200 millimeter zoom, wow, now we're talking. Because now you can do wildlife. You can take pictures of your kids on stage from the back of the room. You can do all of that with this camera that you can't do with the X100F. And that's really the deciding factor on this camera. Do you want to put a big zoom on this camera? Because if you want a big zoom, you can only do it with the X-T30. But a small zoom isn't going to make a huge difference over the digital zoom. It's not going to make such a difference that it's going to outweigh the size factor, the leaf shutter, the optical viewfinder, the built-in neutral density filter, right? Now, it's got other things too. It's got other benefits. It's also got the new Wi-Fi and the new Bluetooth. But here's the thing. The Fuji X100V is coming out in a couple of months. It will have the new sensor. It will have the new Bluetooth and the Wi-Fi. And the rumor mill says it may have a tilt screen on the back. The rumor mill also says it may have the X Pro 3's tilt screen, which I am hoping it doesn't have, because my initial impression is that I'm going to think that's a bad idea. Maybe I'll change my mind if they do it and I try it. But my initial impression is I don't like the idea that I won't be able to quickly chimp without flipping a screen down. That's another video. But soon this camera will have the same guts as the X-T30. And for about the same price when you think about it, when you add the lens on. So really what it all comes down to is that zoom lens. Do you want that big zoom lens on the X-T30? And let me tell you something. If you're a photographer who wants that big zoom lens, you ought to be looking at the X-T3. Not necessarily, okay? The X-T30 might be the camera for you, but you should certainly be looking at the X-T3 as well, because it's only $500 more, and with $500 you get dual card slots, you get weather sealing, you get better 4K video, you get a headphone jack if you're a video guy. That's important stuff. So you should be looking at the X-T3. So we've decided that this camera's not for me. I'm going to stay with the F100 for now. 100F, I'm sorry. And I'm going to let this one go. But what's funny is I wasn't really excited about the 100V because I was worried about the price tag. And I thought they're not going to improve it that much. And then using the X-T30 made me actually start to get more excited about the 100V. Let me tell you, the autofocus on this thing is stellar. And the lens is fantastic. Not the lens, but the sensor is fantastic. We're going to get the same sensor and the same autofocus in the new X100. And I don't know, I'm kind of excited about the V now. I was excited about the X-T30, but now it's actually made me a little bit more excited about the V. So let's wrap this up. If you're looking at these cameras and you're trying to figure out which one's for you, let me try and help you out. Is the X-T30 for you? Here's what I think. If you only want to have one camera, and you are not going to be a pro and you're never going to be a pro, you're not sure what you're going to do. You think you want to do a little street photography maybe? You think that that would be fun? You want to try some of that? But you also think, you might want to try some portrait work, something that you need to be able to have maybe a nice optical zoom at 70 millimeter or maybe an 85 millimeter prime for some really good portrait work or something along those lines. You're not really sure which way you're going to go, and you want to save a little money. Then the Fuji X-T30 is a perfect camera for you. Here's who it's not for. if you know that you want to be able to shoot some portrait work, if you know that you want to be able to shoot some events with long zooms, if you know that you might want to be a pro, then go straight to the Fuji X-T30. $500 more and worth it. But if you don't know, if you're new, if you're a hobbyist, if you're buying a camera for your daughter who says she really wants to get in photography, the X-T30, because you can put a small lens on it and it becomes a camera that does a lot of what the X100F can do, or you can put a big lens on it and it becomes a camera that can do a lot of what the X-T3 can do. It's a great little camera, and I recommend it for the right person. You might be that person. I'm not, because I have all this pro gear. So I can use all the pro gear I need. I don't need a camera that pretends to be a pro camera when you need it to be a pro camera. I've got a pro camera, right? What I want is something for walk around every day. And for that, the X100 series is going to still be my camera. Anyway, I hope I've helped you out. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you have questions, if you have comments, listen, jump into the comments and put them there. And please give me a subscription and give me a like so we can keep this channel alive. Thanks for watching.